Hi, my name is Noelle Burleson. Welcome to my presentation about floods. Our topics are when a storm hits, life during a flood, preparing for a flood, different types of storms. Also, I have interviewed my grandmother, Linda Mexer of Lumberton, North Carolina, who experienced floods during Hurricane Matthew and Florence. It can be scary when a storm approaches. Floods are very dangerous. Let's listen to Mrs. Mexer describe what it's like. Tell me the flood of Hurricane Matthew.
Well, I can. We were living right here in this house, and we had two floods, 18 months apart. We had Matthew, and then we had Florence. And the night we had Matthew, it started early one morning, and it got worse and worse. And by dark, these trees were just, you could hear them swaying back here. And we lost power. We didn't have any power, but we were very fortunate that we had electricity. And so we had a generator. That's what I meant to say. We had a generator, so I had power to cook with, and we had heat and cooling, and my freezer and refrigerator were all working. And so then about almost dark, it was almost dark, Di and I stood over there on the steps, and the water, we have a creek behind our house, and the water came up to that little storage, the giant G-Box storage building back there, and I was concerned that it might keep on coming up and get in the house, but it didn't, and we went to bed about midnight, not knowing. It was storming, but we just went ahead and went to bed. But the next morning, it was sort of like this. The sun was out, and there were limbs down everywhere. We didn't have any trees that hit the house. We did have some out there in the woods that fell, 5 or 6, but nothing hit the house. And so the water now was receding.
Life during a flood. You often lose water and power. The roads can be blocked and unsafe to try. People may need to leave their homes for safety. It can be very scary. Let's listen to Mrs. Mexer describe life during a flood.
And we live in a town that's next to a river, the Lumber River. And so the Lumber River was full, and it had overflowed its banks. And because of that, the people that lived next to the river, their houses did flood. And all those people had to leave their houses and go to shelters. And we had a lot of shelters in town. But G-Pop and I didn't, our house didn't flood. But about 2 days later, we lost water. We didn't have any water. And when you don't have water, you can't flush your toilets. There was no water to take a shower with. We had never been without water before. And so we had this creek behind our house. And G-Pop would go out every day a couple of times and get buckets of water. And he would pour them in the back of the toilets. And then you could flush them. But we really didn't have any way of taking a shower.
Preparing for a flood. Put valuables like pictures on a top floor. Buy groceries, water, batteries, anything you might need. Move cars to the highest point. Find a high place in your house you go to. Mrs. Mexer will give us some pointers on preparing for a flood.
We've had a lot of heavy rains and flooding here because of living on the river. But when the TV starts telling you that that we're going to have a hurricane, people here have lived through so many, they immediately go to grocery stores and buy lots of peanut butter, bread, things you don't have to cook. Some people would buy things like hot dogs because they might have a gas grill. And they could cook them outside on their grill, or anything that they could grill. So people here know how to stock up if they know they're going to have a storm. They know what it's like because all the stores shut down because they have no power. If we hear that there's a hurricane coming, people here take notice.
Different types of storms can cause floods, such as hurricanes, but also sometimes the rain can just stay for days. Rain other places, like in the mountains, runs down and can flood lower places. Mrs. Mexer will tell us different types of storms.
The second flood was Florence that I mentioned, and it came 18 months later. It was really different. The first one, when Matthew came, Matthew just blew through over about 12 hours and was gone. Matthew came and sat right on top of Lumberton, and it rained. It rained like 4 or 5 days in a row and didn't stop. It just pounded Lumberton. Not wind, just it wouldn't move. And we really had more damage with Florence than with Matthew because of the excess of water. There was nowhere else for it to go. The river was full, and it was because it didn't just come and leave. And that's real different for storms. They usually blow through. But Florence just sat here, and even like my backyard looked like a lake. We didn't have any damage of like water getting into our house, but it was just such an enormous amount of water that just fell. Like it was 4 or 5 days.
Summary: floods can be caused by different types of storms. They are dangerous. You need to prepare and listen to news updates to know what's coming. Thank you for listening on this presentations on floods.